whispered Johnny. "Why, it hasn't rained since the 3rd week in August. Papa said so yesterday." "That's nothing, Miss Johnny," put in Alexander, overhearing her. "Folks hereaway don't open their front doors much, only for weddings and funerals and such like. Very likely this has stood shut these 5 years. I know the last time I drove Miss Carr out, before she died, it was just so. And she had to go round to the back as you're doing now." John's eyes grew wide with wonder, but there was no time to say anything, for they had turned the corner of the house, and there was Mrs. Worrett waiting at the kitchen door to receive them. She looked fatter than ever, Elsie thought, but she kissed them both, and said she was real glad to see a Carr in her house at last. "It was too bad," she went on, "to keep you waiting so, but the fact is I got asleep, and when you knocked I waked up all in a daze, and for a minute it didn't come to me who it must be. Take the bags right upstairs, Isophinie, and put them in the keeping-room chamber. How's your pa, Elsie? And Katy? Not laid up again, I hope?" "Oh, no. She seems to get better all the time." "That's right," responded Mrs. Worrett heartily. "I didn't know but what, with hot weather and company in the house and all—" "There's a chicken, Johnny!" she exclaimed, suddenly interrupting herself as a long-legged hen ran past the door. "Want to chase it right away? You can if you like. Or would you rather go upstairs first?" "Upstairs, please," replied John, while Elsie went to the door and watched Alexander driving away down the dusty road. She felt as if their last friend had deserted them. Then she and Johnny followed Isophinie upstairs. Mrs. Worrett never mounted in hot weather, she told them. The spare chamber was just under the roof. It was very hot, and smelt as if the windows had never been opened since the house was built. As soon as they were alone, Elsie ran across the room and threw up the sash, but the moment she let go it fell again with a crash which shook the floor and made the pitcher dance and rattle in the washbowl. The children were dreadfully frightened, especially when they heard Mrs. Worrett at the foot of the stairs calling to ask what was the matter. "It's only the window," explained Elsie, going into the hall. "I'm so sorry, but it won't stay open. Something's the matter with it." "Did you stick the nail in?" inquired Mrs. Worrett. "The nail? No, ma'am." "Why, how on earth do you expect it to stay up, then? You young folks never see what's before your eyes. Look on the window sill and you'll find it. It's put there a purpose." Elsie returned, much discomfited. She looked, and sure enough, there was a big nail, and there was a hole in the side of the window frame in which to stick it. This time she got the window open without accident, but a long blue paper shade caused her much embarrassment. It hung down and kept the air from coming in. She saw no way of fastening it. "Roll it up and put in a pin," suggested John. "I'm afraid of tearing the paper." "Dear, what a horrid thing it is," replied Elsie in a disgusted tone. However, she stuck in a couple of pins and fastened the shade out of the way. After that they looked about the room. It was plainly furnished, but very nice and neat. The bureau was covered with a white towel on which stood a pincushion with "Remember Ruth" stuck upon it in pins. John admired this very much, and felt that she could never make up her mind to spoil the pattern by taking out a pin, however great her need of one might be. "What a high bed!" she exclaimed. "Elsie, you'll have to climb on a chair to get into it, and so shall I." Elsie felt of it. "Feathers!" she cried, a tone of horror. "Oh, John, why did we come? What shall we do?" "I guess we shan't mind it much," replied John, who was perfectly well and considered these little variations on home habits rather as fun than otherwise. But Elsie gave a groan. 2 nights on a feather bed. How could she bear it? Tea was ready in the kitchen when they went downstairs. A small fire had been lighted to boil the water. It was almost out, but the room felt stiflingly warm, and the butter was so nearly melted that Mrs. Worrett had to help it with a teaspoon. Buzzing flies hovered above the table and gathered thick on the plate of cake. The bread was excellent, and so were the cottage cheeses and the stewed quinces, but Elsie could eat nothing. She was in a fever of heat. Mrs. Worrett was distressed at this want of appetite, and so was Mr. Worrett, to whom the children had just been introduced. He was a kindly-looking old man with a bald head, who came to supper in his shirt-sleeves and was as thin as his wife was fat. "I'm afraid the little girl don't like her supper, Lucinda," he said. "You must see about getting her something different for tomorrow." "Oh, it isn't that. Everything is very nice, only I'm not hungry," pleaded Elsie, feeling as if she would like to cry. She did cry a little after tea, as they sat in the dusk. Mr. Worrett smoking his pipe and slapping mosquitoes outside the door, and Mrs. Worrett sleeping rather noisily in a big rocking chair. But not even Johnny found out that she was crying, for Elsie felt that she was the naughtiest child in the world to behave so badly when everybody was so kind to her. She repeated this to herself many times, but it didn't do much good. As often as the thought of home and Katy and Papa came, a wild longing to get back to them would rush over her, and her eyes would fill again with sudden tears. The night was very uncomfortable. Not a breath of wind was stirring, or none found its way to the stifling bed where the little sisters lay. John slept pretty well, in spite of heat and mosquitoes, but Elsie hardly closed her eyes. Once she got up and went to the window, but the blue paper shade had become unfastened and rattled down upon her head with a sudden bump which startled her very much. She could find no pins in the dark, so she left it hanging, whereupon it rustled and flapped through the rest of the night, and did its share towards keeping her awake. About 3 o'clock she fell into a doze, and it seemed only a minute after that before she waked up to find bright sunshine in the room, and half a dozen roosters crowing and calling under the windows. Her head ached violently. She longed to stay in bed, but was afraid it would be thought impolite, so she dressed and went down with Johnny. But she looked so pale and ate so little breakfast that Mrs. Worrett was quite troubled, and said she had better not try to go out, but just lie on the lounge in the best room and amuse herself with a book. The lounge in the best room was covered with slippery purple chintz. It was a high lounge and very narrow. There was nothing at the end to hold the pillow in its place, so the pillow constantly tumbled off and jerked Elsie's head suddenly backward, which was not at all comfortable. Worse, Elsie having dropped into a doze, she herself tumbled to the floor, rolling from the glassy smooth chintz as if it had been a slope of ice. This adventure made her so nervous that she dared not go to sleep again, though Johnny fetched 2 chairs and placed them beside the sofa to hold her on. So she followed Mrs. Worrett's advice and amused herself with a book. There were not many books in the best room. The one Elsie chose was a fat black volume called The Complete Works of Mrs. Hannah More. Part of it was prose and part was poetry. Elsie began with a chapter called Hints on the Formation of the Character of a Youthful Princess, but there were a great many long words in it, so she turned to a story called Coelebs in Search of a Wife. It was about a young gentleman who wanted to get married, but who didn't feel sure that there were any young ladies nice enough for him, so he went about making visits, first to one and then to another, and when he had stayed a few days at a house, he would always say, "No, she won't do," and then he would go away. At last he found a young lady who seemed the very person, who visited the poor, and got up early in the morning, and always wore white, and never forgot to wind up her watch or do her duty, and Elsie almost thought that now the difficult young gentleman must be satisfied and say, "This is the very thing," when lo, her attention wandered a little, and the next thing she knew she was rolling off the lounge for the second time in company with Mrs. Hannah More. They landed in the chairs, and Johnny ran and picked them both up. Altogether, lying on the best parlour sofa was not very restful, and as the day went on, and the sun beating on the blindless windows made the room hotter, Elsie grew continually more and more feverish and homesick and disconsolate. Meanwhile, Johnny was kept in occupation by Mrs. Worrett, who had got the idea firmly fixed in her mind that the chief joy of a child's life was to chase chickens. Whenever a hen fluttered past the kitchen door, which was about once in 3 minutes, she would cry, "Here, Johnny, here's another chicken for you to chase," and poor Johnny would feel obliged to dash out into the sun. Being a very polite little girl, she did not like to say to Mrs. Worrett that running in the heat was disagreeable, so by dinner time she was thoroughly tired out, and would have been cross if she had known how, but she didn't. Johnny was never cross. After dinner it was even worse, for the sun was hotter, and the chickens, who didn't mind the sun, seemed to be walking all the time. "Hurry, Johnny, there's another," came so constantly that at last Elsie grew desperate, got up and went to the kitchen with a languid appeal. "Please, Mrs. Worrett, won't you let Johnny stay by me, because my head aches so hard?" After that Johnny had a rest, for Mrs. Worrett was the kindest of women, and had no idea that she was not amusing her little guest in the most delightful manner. A little before 6 Elsie's head felt better, and she and Johnny put on their hats and went for a walk in the garden. There was not much to see. Beds of vegetables, a few currant bushes, that was all. Elsie was leaning against a paling and trying to make out why the Worrett house had that queer tiptoe expression, when a sudden loud grunt startled her, and something touched the top of her head. She turned, and there was an enormous pig standing on his hind legs on the other side of the paling. He was taller than Elsie as he stood thus, and it was his cold nose which had touched her head. Somehow, appearing in this unexpected way, he seemed to the children like some dreadful wild beast. They screamed with fright and fled to the house, from which Elsie never ventured to stir again during their visit. John chased chickens at intervals, but it was a doubtful pleasure, and all the time she kept a wary eye on the distant pig. That evening, while Mrs. Worrett slept and Mr. Worrett smoked outside the door, Elsie felt so very miserable that she broke down altogether. She put her head in Johnny's lap, as they sat together in the darkest corner of the room, and sobbed and cried, making as little noise as she possibly could. Johnny comforted her with soft pats and strokings, but did not dare to say a word for fear Mrs. Worrett should wake up and find them out. When the morning came, Elsie's one thought was, would Alexander come for them in the afternoon? All day she watched the clock and rode with feverish anxiety. Oh, if Papa had changed his mind, had decided to let them stay for a week at Conic section, what should she do? It was just possible to worry through and keep alive till afternoon, she thought, but if they were forced to spend another night in that feather bed with those mosquitoes, hearing the blue shade rattling